Scrooge's Christmas Carol, Releasing the Last Chain. Written and illustrated by Pippin Lowe. Stave 4, Hard Justice. The end of the day brought a new strength to Noah. Before the men left the day room for the sleeping dungeon, he pledged to never allow another person the opening for attack. Tuesday launched a period of mundane and dull events in the prison. The crowd of inmates amused themselves within their own private groups. At midday, the turnkey entered the day room to announce, "The following people will go on trial at Old Bailey tomorrow." Everyone in the room heard their name called. No one was surprised, but the notification did have the effect of muting conversation. Each prisoner spent the remainder of the day thinking about their fate. Most would probably be judged guilty, so fear for their future created a situation where all retreated into silence. Young Jacob was the only Marley with the task that day. Twice he had attempted the sale of smoke and shadow, only to hear the same thing from each buyer. "I only need one horse." Though Jacob explained the special relationship between the twins, neither man was persuaded, so both sales were lost. As he ran toward his old place of employment, he decided to sell the 2 horses at a discount, since his manager, Matthew Pippin, would require such an enticement. Inside the stable doors, Jacob found Matthew attending the horses. Refreshing the bedding, replenishing the food, and removing the manure were his duties. As Jacob entered the stable, Matthew could be heard whistling. The tune was unclear, yet pleasant to the ear. Approaching the busy man, Jacob said, "Matthew, you old French vagrant." "Good day to you, Jacob. What brings you to your old haunt?" "Do you remember last year when you wanted to buy smoke and shadow?" "Of course. The offer is still open," answered Matthew. "I was hoping that would be so," Jacob responded. "So, £300 for the 2? You are getting an exceptional deal," said Jacob. "Obviously it is enough because you are here willing to sell. Is that correct?" "Yes." Regrettably, Jacob finished the transaction. After he bid Smoke and Shadow a final farewell by giving each an apple and a hug, Jacob then raced to the Old Bailey courthouse to try and secure Noah's freedom. Upon entering the courthouse's front entrance, Jacob was immediately asked, "Can I help you?" The lad that posed the question seemed too young to be working at such a famed organization. Without a pause in thought, Jacob requested, "I am here to see Honourable William Domville. He's working at his home office today. Can any other person help?" "Is he the presiding judge for tomorrow's trials?" "Yes," answered the youth. "I have important business to discuss with him today. Can I have the address of his home office?" requested Jacob. "No." Somewhat surprised, Jacob tried to explain. "He needs to know what I have discovered about an upcoming trial." "You will have to present your evidence at trial," insisted the helper. "But if I can talk to him today, there will be no trial." "I understand, and I wish I could help you. However, if I release the judge's location, he will release me from this job, and I need the work." Jacob realized the undertaking to clear Noah would not be as easy as he first hoped. He bid the pleasant but unhelpful boy farewell, then immediately rushed to the post office. As the office workers were in the middle of closing for the day, Jacob requested to view the London Post Office directory. After an unpleasant look from the attendant, he finally agreed to allow Jacob 2 minutes with the book. With time to spare, Jacob placed the judge's address in memory, thanked the custodian, then made haste for the location. But the building was dark. Jacob stood outside the judge's door, defeated. Marley and Scrooge arrived early at the courtroom. Sitting in the family and friends section of Old Bailey, the 2 invisibles from the future waited for the proceedings to begin. As they peered down upon the court area, Scrooge inquired from Marley, "You asked me if I knew what would happen after I pass. Of course,
I can never know such a thing until presented with the possibilities. But to that same issue, tell me, what have you become now that you are not of flesh?"
"I am working toward becoming a mogrified spirit," answered Marley.
"Are you in damnation right now?"
"This spirit, my future is in transition. And to your question, no one is ever condemned. Some end up lost, but it is through their own action or request." This made little sense to Scrooge.
"Of course, people that murder and rob others must be doomed."
"No, their spirit is of value once cleansed of the deed. In fact, the knowledge of such an event is used to help new worlds avoid such errors."
"So, murder is only an error?"
quipped Scrooge. "It depends on the intention of the murderer."
"So, someone in battle or an executioner is not punished, whereas a drunk who accidentally runs over a pedestrian is punished?"
"None are punished," answered Marley. Then, seeing Scrooge's probing look, added, "That is not the purpose of the infinite consciousness."
"But how could a murderer ever be made clean enough for the
infinite consciousness?" Marley said, finishing Scrooge's question.
"Yes, I guess that is what I am asking."
"Every spirit that lives has some quality the infinite consciousness wants to incorporate into its greater being. That is not always achieved, but it is the goal."
"Is not the infinite consciousness fearful of contamination from impure actions?" asked Scrooge.
"No, it is not possible to contaminate the soul of the infinite consciousness. The human spirit is the container of corruption. Once it sheds its wrongdoing, it is then transformed."
"Are not these spirit and soul the same?"
"Of course not," replied Marley, as he watched prisoners flow into the room. While each inmate shuffled their leg irons toward the convicts' enclosure, the general public continued to fill in the upper area where the two invisibles dwelled. Within minutes, all types of clerks, lawyers, and paid onlookers entered the courtroom. It was only after the room had been filled that the bailiff announced the judges.
"All rise. The Court of Old Bailey is now in session. The Honourable Judge William Domville presiding."
Judge Domville, along with a second judge, entered the room, then made their way to the centre seats behind the bench. With that, a deafening buzz could be heard throughout the room as the various workers scurried in an effort to prepare the details of each convict's circumstances. Other than the balcony, where Scrooge and Marley perched at the rail, the judges sat above the other working groups within the room. The clerks and court reporters sat around a half-circle table just below the judge's bench. To the left of the judges and below the general public area sat the 12 men on the jury. The prisoners settled into an enclosure located a half-dozen feet behind the clerk's table. Within the prisoner's pen, the 20 that would go on trial that day stirred little and said nothing as the courtroom commotion settled into a disquieting wait.
"Bailiff, call the first defendant," ordered Judge Domville.
"Joseph Freeman, rise and face your accuser," demanded the bailiff. Noah watched as his friend walked to the defendant's box. Standing within the holding pen, Joseph followed the movements of the judge as the bailiff continued. "You are being indicted for feloniously stealing a watch from Ephraim Whedon on December 11th at the Theatre Royal. How do you plead?" "Not guilty." With that, Ephraim Whedon took his place in the witness box. That was little more than a raised platform positioned within the space in front of the clerk's table. A black-suited man entered the witness holding pen located on the opposite side of the room, near the jury box. With all players in place, Judge Domville asked Whedon,
What is the value of your watch?
£12.
And did you get the watch back in the same shape as it left you?
Yes, he pointed to the man in the witness holding area, then said, The Constable William Taylor returned the watch.
Good. Please explain how this all came about, requested the judge.
With that, Whedon told of exiting the play as you like it, then of how Joseph brushed up against him as he lifted the watch. Instantly, Whedon realized the crime being committed, then yelled for help. Stop him, thief! After the prosecutor's testimony, William Taylor spoke of the same event with only slight variations. Joseph had no defense except to say he was sorry for the harm he caused.
Sure, everybody is sorry once they get caught, replied the unnamed judge behind the bench.
Joseph's story was one the two authorities heard multiple times during every session at Old Bailey. The boy knew he was going to be punished. He just hoped little physical injury would come to him. Without much thought, the jury found him guilty, and Judge Domville sentenced him to 7 years of transportation to Australia. He was not as displeased as most would be with the sentence, for he desired adventure. The judges and jury made short work of most trials presented that day. 19 of the 20 defendants were charged with feloniously stealing. Only James Maxey had committed a violent crime. While in jail, the felon acted like he would bite the head off a viper. In reality, he had no more courage than to poison his wife and stepdaughter. But to the courts, murder is murder. So, within 15 minutes, the jury found Maxey guilty, and the judge gave him the recommended punishment, death. As the wrist shackles were being added to Maxey, the bailiff called the next defendant.
Dina Smith, rise and face your accuser.
Dee pushed up from the inmate's bench, then entered the defendant's box, where the mirror dangling above the area reflected the sun's light directly into her eyes. As she sneezed twice in quick succession, her body made all efforts to dodge the light.
Steady yourself, demanded the judge.
Dee settled into a spot where the light caused the least discomfort. Then the bailiff continued,
You are being indicted for feloniously stealing a greatcoat from Hannah Denhouse on December 23rd. How do you plead?
Guilty.
You do realize I will have no choice in sentencing if you submit such a plea? Inquired the judge.
Within truth, I have no choice either. I did take the coat so I could get warm, and I'd do it again, Dee proudly admitted. The jury looked on as Judge Domville pronounced both the sentence required by law, yet included his own bias in the decree and lessened the severity of the punishment.
Dina Smith, I sentence you to be whipped indoors a total of 10 lashes.
Even with the reduction of lashes, all of the women within the courthouse groaned at the idea of a bare-chested beating. After Dee's trial, Noah began to merge the remaining cases into one story. In each crime, though different in the details of the who, what, and where of the misdeed, the outcomes for the most part were the same. Something was stolen, someone stopped the thief, and now someone was going to punish the criminal. The most interesting trial occurred just before Simon's, and it provided the entire room, except the prosecutor in the case, with a much-needed break from the stories of evil and misfortune. On December 27th, 3 young friends, Catherine Fitzgerald, Ruby Ann Marr, and Mary Agderb, entered Bluck's boutique. All 3 bought and paid for a ribbon within a minute of each other. The owner, Benjamin Bluck, flirted with Catherine by telling her she was pretty enough to marry. Catherine rolled her eyes at her friends as the 3 giggled at the idea of marriage to such a lech. Ruby then paid for her ribbon, and Bluck said, "If you ever need a place to sleep, I can find one for you." "Aren't you kind?" she sarcastically replied while winking at her friends. All this was going on like a game of Humour the Casanova until Mary paid for her ribbon, then Bluck turned mean. As Bluck was handing Mary her change, he grabbed her hand, then yelled, "Why are you girls stealing from me? Release me, old man. You are delusional." With that, Bluck began to scream like a banshee. "No, none of you have paid me for the ribbon. Stop that. You are a scoundrel." Before any of the women could make their escape from the store, Davis, the constable, stopped their exit. After Davis had quieted the four, he then listened to their stories. Even though the three women told the same story, and the store owner had the reputation of lustfulness, the officer believed the store owner's story, because the others were girls. So, off to Newgate they went, where the magistrate had no pity for the three. For some reason, the turnkey put them in their own cell at Newgate and never allowed them into the day room. Their trial was unique in that Judge Domville was knowledgeable of Bluck. The judge had past experiences with Bluck's false accusations, and he was not going to allow his court to be deceived again. He instructed the jury to find the women not guilty, and when the jury did as told, he ordered them to be freed. As a last ruling in the case, the judge sentenced Bluck to pay all court costs, the costs for housing the women at Newgate, and a sizable fine for lying. The women received nothing but their freedom. As the three women left the courtroom, Simons was called forth to give an account of his crime. His act of lawlessness showed him to be both stupid and brutal. The prosecutor, Franklin Paxton, explained finding his only black sheep butchered among a field of white sheep. The savagery of the kill played on the minds of every person listening. Paxton detailed the finding of legs, guts, and other parts spread throughout the pasture. He then followed the blood drippings to Simon's yard, where he found the sheep's head spiked atop a stake. The gruesome sight made it obvious to the farmer who had committed the crime, the bloodstained man standing within feet of him. Confronting Simons, the farmer shouted, "That is my sheep's head." "Do you want it back?" "No, I want your head on that stake," he said, tackling Simons to the ground. After several minutes of fisticuffs, and more time of wiping blood from their faces, Constable Hugh Petherick stopped their brawling by arresting them both. Once in the magistrate's office, the criminal was jailed and Paxton was sent home. The only difference between Simon's larceny and all but one other theft being judged that day was the sentence. Without any misgiving, Judge Domville announced death to be Simon's justice. As clouds shaded the afternoon sun, the mirror above the defendant's box no longer reflected light upon the inmate's face. This was the only thing that went easy on Henry that day. When the bailiff called his name, he just remained seated. "I said, Henry Freeman, rise and face your accuser," yelled the bailiff. Joseph pushed his cousin forward. Slowly, Henry entered the defendant's box. He focused his eyes on Joseph sitting below him in the convict's enclosure. "You are being indicted for feloniously stealing a watch from Lawrence Brand on December 28th at the Theatre Royal. How do you plead?" Henry remained silent. "How do you plead?" demanded the bailiff. Still silent, Henry began to shake at being the focus of attention. "You must plead," said Judge Domville. Henry opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Are you able to speak?" asked the judge. Henry sounded a squeak, but not a word was voiced. Irritated, the judge continued, "You will not be reprieved from your crime through silence." He waited for a response from Henry, but the only thing that materialized was a puddle of urine at the youth's feet. "This is your last chance, boy. Speak or be found guilty." The courtroom fell into a silence that roared with tension. Finally, Judge Domville said, "You have left me no choice. Henry Freeman, I find you guilty of the crime of feloniously stealing. I sentence you to death." With this proclamation, Henry immediately fainted, so Joseph ran to his cousin's side. Helping the boy to his feet, the elder Freeman asked, "Your Honour, may I be heard?"
You may, if you can clarify a reason for not upholding my verdict.
I can, Your Honour.
Then speak.
Henry is my cousin. It is fear that has gagged his tongue. We're born from country fishermen. A year ago, our parents, along with several brothers and sisters, lost their lives in a boating accident.
How does this tragedy speak to the present?
I would have died in that accident if Henry had not saved me.
He paused to wait for any response from the judge, but there was none, so Joseph continued.
As the boat sank, I hit my head on something, which forced me into unconsciousness.
Again, a pause, and again, silence.
I'm not sure how Henry was able to pull me to safety, but he did. Sir, if it weren't for Henry, I would be with the Creator, and Henry never would have become a pickpocket, for it was me that taught him that skill.
Your honesty is refreshing. So, to the remaining Freeman clan, what shall I do with you?
Joseph perceived a need to remain quiet as the judge pondered their situation. The question itself was rhetorical, for Judge Domville knew exactly what he wanted to do.
You are both guilty, but with your circumstances, your punishment should allow you the ability to reform.
He then paused and posed a question.
Do you have the ability to improve yourself?
Yes, sir, we do.
And will you work at becoming honest citizens?
Your Honour, I promise to repair our past deeds.
How?
Well, you are already transporting me. If we're both transported together, I'll take it upon myself to raise Henry in an ethical way. We'll work hard for England at building the new world in Australia.
My mistrust of convicts has me wondering if I can have confidence in your word.
How can I assure you? Asked Joseph.
I do not think you can, for only your future actions will show me the truth of your words.
Maybe past actions can help you decide.
Explain yourself, demanded the judge.
When Henry was a toddler, he learned to walk backwards first. Why, no one knows. But for over a year, he moved, for the most part, through the world in reverse. The family had actually gotten used to him doing this, when one day, on a walk, he suddenly shoved both myself and his sister Emily to the ground. As I hit the dirt, I heard a crashing sound all around us. Turning toward Henry, I watched as a huge tree branch came to rest mere inches from his feet. Henry saved us that day. Plus, he never spent much time walking backwards after that incident.
It seems that you have to have Henry with you, just to stay alive, the judge commented as the courtroom giggled.
That is probably true, sir. If you sentence Henry to death, please do the same for me.
The judge stared at Joseph, determining his seriousness. He knew the statement was lunacy, but did not blame Joseph for the telling or chivalry within the concept.
On any other day, I probably would do just that. But today, Australia needs workers. So, I sentence you both to transportation for life. If either of you ever return to England, you will be hanged. Do I make myself understood?
Yes, Your Honour. Thank you, Joseph said.
You can thank me by upholding your word.
Yes, of course, sir.
With that, the two boys returned to their seats.
Do you see your younger self anywhere?
Asked Scrooge. No, but I remember being kept in a separate witness's room. However, I never did give any testimony, replied Marley.
Why?
I sat waiting in that cold, musty room for hours, all day, in fact. When the sun began to go down, I left because I figured the trials were finished for the day, explained Marley.
Why did you not ask?
I could find no one to ask.
And even if you would have testified, Scrooge paused, then continued, you probably would have lied, right?
Marley sighed long and slow, then replied, probably. Scrooge motioned toward Flora, who was sitting near them in the public gallery.
Unfortunately, she will not be allowed to give witness, he said.
She does not have any knowledgeable facts of the case, anyway. The activity within the courtroom scurried with motion as the various clerks, lawyers, and judges caught up with the needed documentation from the multiple verdicts rendered throughout the day. Once updated, Judge Domville said,
"Bailiff, call the next defendant."
"Noah Marley, rise and face your accuser," shouted the bailiff. Without hesitation, Noah walked to the defendant's box. As he stood motionless, the bailiff continued, "You are being indicted for feloniously stealing £112 from Pressy and Barclay's grocery store on December 24th. How do you plead?"
"Not guilty."
Noah watched as his old boss, Bartholomew Pressy, entered the witness box. A rotund man dressed in a black robe and cape approached Pressy. With each step, the lawyer's belly jiggled from side to side, his long white wig flopping forward with each step. The man's sway gave one the impression that a gorilla was loose in the courtroom. "Are you the owner of Pressy and Barclay's grocery?" asked the barrister.
"I am."
"And is Barclay within this courtroom?"
"No, he has retired."
"So, being the sole owner of the grocery store, please tell the court about the theft that occurred at your business."
"Noah had been working for me for 4 years, and I thought it was time to trust him with the Christmas Eve's activities," began Pressy.
"Why did you trust him?" asked the lawyer.
"He seemed like the perfect worker, always on time, good with people, and I thought honest."
"He is honest," yelled the ghost Marley.
Scrooge looked at Marley, then said, "This is going to be hard for you. You cannot change anything, so for your own sake, calm yourself."
Marley looked upon Scrooge with anger, then, without a sound, moved next to Noah in the defendant's box. Scrooge was surprised that Marley had left him, but understood his need to be near his brother. Mr. Pressy continued the tale of encountering Noah at the bank, discovering the money missing, and then having his clerk arrested. There was little more to the story than that.
"It breaks my heart to have Noah turn on me this way. Before this happened, I looked at him as almost a third son,"
he said, ending his tale of the event. At that point, Pressy's lawyer asked Noah, "Is there anything that you can say that will change the facts of the event?"
"I did not take the money. It must have fallen out of the bag as I made my way to the bank after closing."
"Now, let me figure this out. The money fell out of the bag. How?"
"The ground was icy, and twice I fell en route."
"Did you have the intelligence to look inside the bag after each fall?"
"No."
"Then what makes you think the money fell from the bag?"
"Because it was not there when I went to deposit it."
"And there is the problem. You want us to believe you are telling the truth, but you are lying, are you not? It is you that stole the money, and not some phantom pedestrian. Is that not the facts?"
"No, I stole the money,"
Marley the ghost roared, with such a force that it caused the lawyer's wig to move off his forehead. As the lawyer adjusted his hairpiece, he asked, "Well, Mr. Marley, did or did you not steal the money?" As Noah shook his head no, his invisible brother spoke the word, "Yes."
"Speak up," instructed the judge.
"Yes, yes, yes, I did it," cried the spectre. A hot steam of anger rushed from the ghost's body as Noah said, "I would not have done that to Mr. Pressy. He told me he was going to make me his manager, and I would not have injured that possibility." "So, you not only spoiled your raise, but you destroyed it. Is that not correct?"
"No, you pompous jackass."
Marley looked at Scrooge, then added, "How can I change this for Noah?"
"Jacob, you know that nothing you do will change what happened in the past," Scrooge called to Marley.
The rest of the trial continued as expected, with Noah being found guilty. His sentence was somewhat surprising, but in truth expected by any person knowledgeable of court procedures.
"You are sentenced to death,"
announced Judge Domville. From the balcony, Flora could be heard weeping. Wrist shackles were immediately put on Noah. As he walked to the prisoner's bench, Henry stood up, then moved next to him. The boy hugged Noah with such emotion that Judge Domville interrupted their moment.
"There will be time for that back at Newgate. All prisoners are to remain seated."
As Henry took his seat next to Noah extended his arm over the boy's shoulders. While the remaining trial got underway, a commotion erupted in the jury box. It seemed as though most of the 12 men were itching to be finished with the session. The entire day had passed from morning to evening without even one moment of rest. The men complained of being tired and hungry. Nonetheless, what they mostly wanted was time in the lavatory. Judge Domville quieted the 12 by telling them everyone was in the same situation, and then he continued the final trial. The jury almost instantaneously found the man guilty of feloniously stealing, and the judge announced transportation as the punishment. With that, the session was ended, and all but Scrooge and Marley left the room.
"Now what?"
asked Scrooge. "The tragedy unfolds," replied Marley.
"So, we are going into a hardship greater than this,"
Scrooge said, gesturing to a now empty courtroom. "This is a church compared to our ultimate destination." With that mental thought, Scrooge quieted, then followed Marley to the next day. As inmates shuffled into the day room, a general melancholy controlled the area. Friends clustered together so as to console each other over their sentences. Joseph was the only outlier. Cheerfully, he spoke to Henry about the great adventure they would experience. Henry exploded. "I would rather be hanged than go on another boat." The outburst hushed the room. A tear set upon the corner of Joseph's eye as he said, "I also fear the water, Henry. Nothing scares me more." "I'm not going with you, Joseph." "What will you do?" "Well, you're going to escape." Without hesitation, Henry proclaimed, "Yes, I am young. I can escape as we are walking to the ship, and no one will know I am not a regular boy." "Henry, everyone's going to know, because you'll be wearing both leg and wrist irons," said Joseph. "Bloody crap." "Look, Henry, you're braver than anybody I know. We can do this together," Joseph said, as he squatted to be at Henry's eye level. "Look at me." Henry reluctantly lifted his eyes to his cousin's, then whispered, "I'm afraid." "I am too. I just act like I have valor. But you have courage I will never equal." "Yes, Henry, you are the exceptional one here," stated Dee. "My dear cherub, listen to me. You have the power of flight. You just need to learn how to move your wings." As Henry looked upon the weathered face of the African woman from America, the door to the day room swung open. The turnkey announced,
"Dina Smith."
"Yes," Dee replied.
"Follow me."
Without a pause, Dee followed the man out of the room. As they made their way through the dank corridors of the prison, Dee began to inhale calming breaths. By the time the whipping room door was opened enough to receive her, she had placed her mental focus into a prayerful state. Once inside the whipping room, a hooded man secured Dee to the manacles on the wall, removed her shirt, then said, "You've been sentenced to a total of 10 lashings. Looking directly into her face, he continued, "For what I will bestow upon you within this room today, you will not speak of to another. You must use silence to protect yourself, me, and those brought to this room in the future. Do you understand?" Dee was, without a doubt, bewildered, yet she shook her head in the affirmative as she answered, "I will keep the secret of this room until my death." Pleased, the hooded man said, "Then prepare yourself for the strap." He counted each of his steps as he walked to a spot directly behind Dee. Before she realized it, the man snapped the whip. The rawhide made a distinct double crack as it contacted Dee's flesh. She remained motionless as the movement of blood began to trickle from the fresh wounds. In quick succession, the man cracked the whip 4 more times, then paused. Dee wondered why the man seemed to be merely brushing her back with the lash. With each crack of the whip, she felt a rush of air on her back, but not the deep sting of contact. After the first 5 lashes, the man then started popping the whip in the open space near Dee. Once the count of 5 additional air lashes was sounded, he stopped, walked over to Dee, and said, "When are you going to talk of this?" "At death." With that, the man walked Dee to the counter, who tallied the marks on her back. After the required number of open wounds were counted, Dee was allowed to put on her shirt. She hoped she would be returned to the day room so she could bid the others farewell, but the turnkey walked her to the front entrance. As Dee left the prison, she wondered how 5 lashes delivered 10 cuts. She did not dwell on the bewilderment, for the promise of silence until death caused her to just let the whole flogging dissolve from thought. Instead, she smiled at the realization that freedom was hers again. Noah was waiting at the visitor's pen for his brother when Dee passed by him. "Dee! Dee!" he called to her. She stopped mid-step and walked to Noah. "Good. I wanted to bid you farewell," she said. "Were you punished?" "Yes." She stumbled through the rest of her response. 10 lashes. That ain't too much. So, what will you do now? Ain't no answer to that. Here, take this." He handed her the last of his pence. "No, today all I need is my liberty." With that, she handed Noah his money back, gently brushed her hand against his cheek, then began putting distance between herself and the prison. In an effort to stay warm, Noah bounced from foot to foot. Finally, after 30 minutes, Jacob arrived. As Noah watched his younger brother approach the prison, his anger grew into a storm. "Why did you not testify at my trial?" "I was there all day, but—" "I don't care about your excuses. Your indifference has gotten me killed." Jacob was shocked by his brother's statement. He feared his crime had been uncovered and nearly succumbed to his inner pressure of guilt. As he opened his mouth to confess, Noah interjected by saying, "You have got to fix this. I should not have to die for something I did not do." "The Home Secretary is scheduled to review your death sentence tomorrow, and I will be there," assured Jacob. "I need you more now than I have ever needed anybody since birth. I will convince him you should be given leniency. I know you will try. When is this review scheduled?" "In the afternoon. It starts at 3, said Jacob. "Before you go, I would like you to bring me extra food and a bottle of rum tomorrow." "Are you planning a party?" "Yes, and I have to have those things tomorrow." "Can you bring them?" Noah asked. "I will be here by noon. Is that soon enough?" answered Jacob. "Yes." After Noah returned to the day room, Henry asked, "Have you seen Dee? I have been waiting for her, but she has not come back." The high pitch in his tone highlighted the worry in his face. "She has been released. I watched her leave," assured Noah. "Was she bloody?" No. The crown is not filled with savages." "I will miss her. I know you will." Henry then whispered into Noah's ear, "She reminds me of Joseph's mum. I think I miss Auntie Arlene more than anyone." "In this world, Henry, people can do great things if only one person believes in them. You have 2 people who believe in every step you will make." "Really? Who?" "Joseph and me." Henry wrapped his arms around Noah's waist, then for a moment laid his head against his friend's chest. "Break it up over there," yelled the turnkey. As the darkness overtook the prison, all but the transport and condemned prisoners had been punished, then released. The day room felt abandoned. Friday morning left Noah depressed. As he waited in the visitor's pen for his brother, he reflected upon the various events since Christmas. It was beyond him to wonder the why of his situation. Instead, his mind moved toward the future by focusing on protecting Flora. In prison, he could do little to help her. Keeping her secure worried him more than death, and personal extinction did frighten him. He knew he could not promise her safety, so he did what those without hope do. He prayed. "Sorry, I'm late. Had some trouble getting the extra food for you," Jacob said. Noah finished his prayer, then opened his eyes. Standing before him were 2 arms holding a bag. "You did not have any problem buying the rum?" Jacob peeked around the bag, then said, "Rum is running in the streets. Drinking as all people are doing these days. The weather has everyone hibernating with liquor." As Jacob handed the various foods to Noah, he added, "I have been told that Honourable Addington is a fair Home Secretary." "Is he fair enough to give me a pardon?" "That I do not know, but if he can be convinced, I will persuade." "If you sway him, come back and tell me," Noah requested. "You'll be the first to know." The brothers turned to leave. Then, in an afterthought, Noah turned back and called to Jacob, "I love you." Jacob just acted as if he had not heard his brother's words. Within an hour, the younger Marley entered the Home Secretary's office. Jacob quietly waited at the head of Honourable Addington's desk as the Home Secretary continued to write. Finally, Jacob cleared his throat. Yes, I know you are there," said the nobleman. After he finished his thought, Home Secretary Addington placed his quill back into the inkwell stand, then raised his head to view the lad standing before him. "Can I help you?" "I am here to plead for leniency in my brother's case." "And your brother is?" asked the official. "Noah Marley. He was convicted of theft, but he did not commit the crime." The Home Secretary looked back at the paper he was writing, then said, "I have heard that every day from men I am more inclined to believe than you." With that, he picked up his pen and started to once again write. "I found the money and have brought it. I want to give it back to Pressy and Barclay's grocery store. Then you can let my brother go." Wait. Justice doesn't work that way." "Why not?" asked Jacob. "Because a crime has been committed and judgment was made. You cannot right the wrong by simply repaying the money," said Honourable Addington. "Why not? The crime was the taking of the money, so why won't repayment clear the wrongdoing?" "Because, my dear fellow, other costs have occurred since the crime." "Then I will pay those costs too." "Why did you not come forth before the trial?" "As soon as I found the money, I went to see Judge Domville the day before the trial, but I was unable to find him available." "And at the trial, why were you silent then?" Jacob answered every question the Home Secretary had as to the reason for his delay in action. "All right, let me examine the court's records." With that, both men fell silent as the nobleman read the report on Noah's case. Finally, Honourable Addington looked at Jacob and said, "I am not inclined to release your brother. His crime warrants punishment." "But he told the truth. The money did fall from his bag when he fell. I retrieved the money from the boy who found it on the ground." The Home Secretary studied Jacob, then said, "I do not believe you. You would have never gotten that money back from a saint, let alone a commoner." "You have to let Noah go." "Why?" "His wife is having a baby." "That is still no reason to overturn his verdict." Scrooge looked at the ghost Marley, then said, "I thought you did not know that Flora was with child." "I did not know at that time. I just said that in hopes it would influence him," said the ghost. "I will pay you anything you want," said the young Marley. Addington rebuked Jacob's offer by threatening his freedom. "Do you want to join your brother? If that will get him released, then yes, take me to jail instead."
"There is more to this than you are saying. Why are you willing to take your brother's place?"
"He saved my life. I owe him," replied the young Jacob.
"That is another lie, is it not?" asked Scrooge.
The ghost sighed, then admitted, "I would have told any lie to get Noah released."
"And yet, telling the truth was not an option?"
Scrooge waited for Marley's response, but he knew none would come. "I will give you every shilling I own, plus take Noah's place in prison if you will free him," petitioned the young Marley as he handed the money to the Home Secretary.
"Well, hanging is too harsh of a punishment for your brother,
so I will decrease his sentence." Quickly, the man wrote some numbers on a sheet of paper, then counted the exact amount of money needed to pay Noah's debt.
"I will release your brother for time served. I only need enough money to make Pressy whole and to cover the costs of Noah's incarceration."
Addington then returned the remainder of the funds to Jacob and warned him,
"If you ever try and bribe me again, I will jail you for a year."
"As you should," said Jacob. Honourable Addington groaned at Jacob's overpraise, took up his quill in one hand, then waved Jacob away with the other hand.
"You have done what you came to do, so be gone."
With enthusiasm, Jacob raced from the building, then ran the several blocks to the prison. It did not surprise him that visiting hours had passed, but he was so excited he stood there until darkness forced him to leave. As Jacob whistled his way home, Noah placed the party bag on the table, then said, "Get out your cups, boys." As he put the bottle of rum on the countertop, he added, "Tonight we party, for tomorrow brings our parting." Joseph looked at the bottle and said, "Your brother must like you. This is the good stuff." "I assume he does," replied Noah, placing a loaf of bread and a brick of cheese in front of the bottle. Henry licked his lips at the sight of the food. "Ready for a banquet?" Noah asked, patting the seat next to him. Henry sat down, then asked, "Do I get as much as you?" "No," answered Noah. Henry frowned, then said, "That's all right. I'm smaller than you. I don't eat as much."
"You didn't wait for me to finish, Henry. I'm going to give you more than me. You're going to need the extra energy for the walk to the ship."
With that, Noah ripped the bread into 3 fairly equal sizes. The process was repeated with the cheese, except the pieces were not at all equal in size. Noah handed Henry the biggest pieces of both. The boy giggled with delight as he bit down hard on the cheese. "Here's yours, Joseph," he said, handing the lad his share. Joseph placed his cup on the table as he sat across from his friends. Noah then poured each half a cup of rum. Henry was too busy devouring the cheese to even look at the cup in front of him. Joseph guzzled the drink. After finishing, he held out the cup and asked, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" "You have got to pace yourself," Noah said, as he poured another half cup. "Sure. How's the cheese, Henry?" Was all that could be heard from the boy. The 3 gorged themselves until all the cheese was consumed and only fragments of bread remained. Henry placed his sliver of bread in front of Noah and said, "Look at my belly." He lifted his shirt, rubbed his stomach, then added, "It has never been this full before." "I'm glad I could give you a first. Are you ready for a toast?" "Do you have a toasting fork?" asked Henry. "Not that kind of toast, but this kind of toast," Noah said, raising his cup. Joseph followed Noah's lead and lifted his drink. Together, they looked at Henry, who nearly inhaled the last of his food, then clanked his cup against the others. "You two have made this experience bearable for me, and I will miss you. So, let's drink to Australia." "All right, may Australia move to Germany," said Henry. "I will not toast to that. It makes no sense," sneered Joseph. "That's probably why it's a good toast, Joseph,"
The way you're enjoying that rum, you aren't going to remember any toast at all in a half hour, said Noah, as he forced his cup toward the others.
Fine. May Germany move to Australia? Without a pause, Joseph clanked his cups with the other, then drank. No, stop. That is not the toast. I want Australia to move to Germany. Henry, you haven't figured this out. If Australia moves to Germany, where's Germany going to go? Oh, yes. I guess Germany has to move to Australia. That's it. Same toast, said Joseph, clicking his cup against the others.
Together they drank, and Henry immediately started coughing.
Oh my, this stuff is horrible. With rum, you have to drink until you like it, said Joseph.
That's not going to happen, Henry said,
as he poured the remainder of his liquid into Joseph's cup. He then went and filled his cup with water. Returning to the table, Noah asked, So, tomorrow is the big day.
Here's it, tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow, responded Joseph. I'm telling you, Joseph, you are not going to be able to move, let alone trek 5 miles to Woolwich tomorrow, if you do not slow down.
Noah, I know you're right, but I do not care. When again will I be able to party in this lovely prison? He asked. Together, they made a toast to nearly everything. The food was gone, but the boys stayed full with drink. I toast Noah, Joseph said. Not waiting for the clanking of cups, he drank his empty, then belched. Henry giggled as he let out his own nearly silent burp, to which Joseph let go another gush of sound. Then Henry, a little louder than his first time, emitted a true belch. This exchange of stomach roars continued between the cousins until Noah breathed deep and then sounded a belch the entire room heard. Henry giggled as Joseph looked upon Noah with envy. They all became silent, stared at each other, then erupted with laughter. Fighting off tears of humor, Noah asked, Have you two always been so competitive? Only when we're competing, replied Joseph. Noah laughed so hard he fell off the bench. The shock in Henry's face caused Joseph to act. He went to Noah and helped him to his feet. Are you hurt? Joseph, you are a pleasure to drink with, said Noah. And you thought I was drinking too much. As they again took their places at the table, Noah commented, I guess gravity's more powerful when drunk. Who knew? After regaining his composure, he added, So, tell me, what is the most competitive thing you two have ever done? Silence overtook the three as the cousins looked at each other in search of a response. Then a smile overcame Joseph as he said, Well, that has to be the day Henry and I were fishing on the River Ada. Noah smiled as Joseph prepared to elaborate. No, don't tell him about that, cried Henry. Here, take a sip of my drink. It'll soothe your bashfulness, offered Joseph. Henry grabbed his cup and took a swig. Coughing, he said, Maybe I could get used to that crap. Well, bloody Henry, get rid of that earth juice and join the men, said Noah. Henry finished the water. Then Noah poured him a small amount of rum as Joseph told the story. We both threw out our lines at the same time, and instantly I felt a powerful tug. I cried out, Henry, I got one, and he yelled back at me, So have I. Joseph took another gulp of drink, then continued, We struggled over our catches. First, I thought I was pulling mine toward the boat, when all of a sudden the fish pulled hard against my line. Then Henry squealed, I think I almost got it. I did not squeal, protested Henry. Bloody if you weren't excited. Anyway, this went on for several minutes where we both declared success over our catch, only to have the fight continue. So, did you eat well that night? Asked Noah. Well, I did, replied Joseph. I ate. You shared with me, commented Henry. Well, that was the least I could do. So, what happened to Henry's fish? Noah asked. We pulled and pulled without much success. Then I decided I was either going to haul in the fish or break my pole.
I yanked so hard that Henry took a dive into the water.
What did you do? Rock the boat or something? Noah wondered.
It's the something. When I finally hauled in the fish, I saw my hook was attached to the beast's tail, yet a second hook, Henry's hook, remained in its mouth.
Noah shook his head, then laughed.
Did you have any idea that was happening? Why would I? Who hooks a fish in the tail?
Obviously you, replied Henry, a little irritated.
So, Henry, your cousin here has totally humiliated you. Can you best his story? Asked Noah.
I got an even better one, replied Henry.
Without hesitation, he jumped into his tale.
About 2 years ago, we were fishing, but it was a lake. I don't remember which one.
You boys do a lot of fishing, said Noah. Well, we are from Brighthelmston. What else can we do there? Said Joseph.
I'm talking, complained Henry. He waited for silence, then continued. Jimmy? Who's Jimmy? Asked Noah. That was my older brother, answered Henry, as he again waited for silence to proceed. We had been fishing all day, and Jimmy hadn't caught even one fish. He kept saying the waters were bad, but Joseph and I were pulling them in like a siphon.
Ha, Jimmy, there's a lad that hated to lose at anything he considered a competition, added Joseph.
Anyway, Jimmy wanted to move, but we didn't. So he flung his line out as far as it would go, only to have it tangled in a tree branch across the lake.
Already Noah was smiling when he mentioned, small lake.
Henry nodded, then continued, we did not want to lose the line, so we followed the string to the tree limb. All the while Jimmy was tugging on the line, hoping it would turn free. It didn't, so now we're under this huge tree trying to figure out exactly which branch had caught the hook. Henry paused as he waited for comments, but none came, so he continued. Finally, Joseph tracked its location and began to jump up in hopes of grabbing the branch. And he did. So there he is, swinging a foot off the boat, trying to loosen the string, when a snake dropped onto his back.
Was it an adder? Asked Noah.
I thought it was, answered Joseph. Joseph, you would not be here if it was, insisted Henry. And yet I am. So it must have been a smooth snake, said Joseph. I doubt it. They are both rare and cautious, asserted Noah. I don't know, said Henry. It was just a snake. Anyway, Joseph screamed like a baby. I did not. Before we knew it, he dropped from the branch into the lake. The snake made an exit as Joseph kept yelling, "It's gonna kill me! It's gonna kill me!" It almost did. I don't think so. Henry paused, then finished his story. Joseph popped to the surface holding up a twig, yelling, "I got it!" Jimmy just shook his head, then asked, "Do you always have poor vision?" "I had water in my eyes," complained Joseph. As the three tapped mugs in a toast to good fish stories, Noah asked, "Where is Jimmy now?" Joseph looked at Henry, and as tears began to form in his eyes, he answered, "He died with the rest of our family. I've seen him once since then." "No, Henry. You just saw someone who looked like him. You wanted to see him." "Joseph, don't tell me what I saw. Besides, it was a dream, and Jimmy came to me." "It's all right. I believe you, Henry. What did your brother do in the dream?" asked Noah. "The sky was a different color, no blues like ours. It was kind of orange and green." "That makes brown," said Joseph. "It was not brown. It was like swirling oranges and greens." "Why don't you believe me?" he asked Joseph. "I believe you, Henry," answered Noah. "But my own cousin doesn't," he said, glaring at Joseph.
"He is just drunk. He knows you are telling the truth."
"Did Jimmy say anything to you?" asked Noah, in an effort to move the conversation along. "No, but I understood him. The light rays on the horizon put a halo around him. His hair was a blaze of color, as if from another world. He looked at me, then turned toward the setting sun. Jimmy wanted to walk into the sunset." "Was something stopping him?" asked Noah. "Me. I felt his worry for me." A tear dropped from Noah's chin as Henry continued. I waved to him. He turned and started to run into the orange glow. I could see him slipping away, and I cried, but I was no longer afraid to be without him."
"That was beautiful," said Joseph as he swigged his drink, then immediately dropped his head on the table. "Looks like he is gone," said Noah, motioning his head toward Joseph. "He lives in the world of the gone," replied Henry. He took a sip from his cup, swallowed hard, then said, "This stuff is all right, I guess. Noah, what is your fishing story?"
"Well, I've never had the pleasure of living near a good fishing hole, but I do have a water yarn." He paused for a moment, then continued. "When I was about 12 and Jacob was 9, we were swimming. Actually, we were just trying to cool ourselves from the hot sun. Anyway, we came across this large set of flat rocks that were about an inch below the water's surface. The group of 3 or 4 rocks lined up perfectly together, so one continued the other. Together, they created a slight incline."
Noah took a deep breath, then resumed the tale.
Jacob sat down, still totally clothed, at the high end of the stone formation and pushed off. He slid all the way down the rock.
"That sounds fun."
It was, and that was also the problem.
"How can fun be a problem?"
We both slid down the rock for over an hour. When we tired of the activity, we headed for home. That is when I noticed Jacob had worn out the seat of his pants. I could see his butt cheeks from a block away," laughed Noah.
Scrooge looked to Marley's backside, then asked,
"Looks like you recovered. Did you get scratched?"
"A little, but mostly I could hardly walk for a week," replied the ghost.
"Oh, that sounds painful,"
said Scrooge. "That was the most enjoyable day of my life," said Marley. "Did you tell your brother?" asked Henry.
"The damage was done. I didn't see any reason to point out his bareness. Of course, Mum noticed the moment he walked into the house, but she thought it was entertaining too," replied Noah.
The two looked at each other, then simultaneously howled with laughter.
"Oh,"
moaned Joseph, barely lifting his head, then dropping it to the table again.
"We won't be hearing from him again today," said Noah.
He placed his arm across Henry's shoulder, then asked, "Can I talk to you about something important?" Henry took a big swallow of rum, placed his mug atop the table, then said, "All right, I'm drunk. Now what are we talking about?"
"Joseph thinks he's going on a grand adventure.
But England will put you both to work. There will be troubles. Will there be nothing good about Australia?"
"Of course there will be. You'll be with Joseph, and I'm sure there will be some good fishing holes."
"Noah?" Henry rose from the bench, cupped his hands around Noah's ear, then whispered,
"I'm not going to Australia."
"You do realize you will be in irons tomorrow?"
"Yes, but I have it figured out. Watch me."
With that, Henry inhaled as much air as his body would hold, and his stomach puffed as he waited for a count of 30. With a gush, he released the breath.
"When the turnkey puts the irons on, I'm going to make my wrists and ankles huge by holding my breath. This will make them loosen when I just breathe normally. I can slip out of the irons later."
"I have to give you this, Henry. Your mind is a thinking instrument."
"However, there is one problem. The turnkey isn't going to be shackling your stomach."
"I know that."
"You can try that, and I hope it works, but—"
I know the hands and feet don't hold air," said Henry.
"That's an odd fact of biology, Henry. Is the reason you don't want to go because of how your family died?"
"I think so. And it is so cold. Why are they doing this now?"
"I can't tell you for sure, but it is a long trip. Maybe the season works for them later."
"I'm still going to escape, if I can."
"Go where your heart directs. But you seem to be a thoughtful person. So tell me, how do you strengthen yourself?"
Henry did not quickly reply. Instead, he said, "I do not think I understand your question."
"Well, think of yourself going into battle against England's greatest enemy."
"France," interrupted Henry.
Yes, France. So, how would you prepare for a battle with Napoleon? Would you pray? Or sharpen a sword? Maybe even practice sword work? How do you find the strength within yourself to face troubles?
Without hesitation, Henry answered, "I sing." Noah looked into the boy's face, then commented,
"Why am I not surprised? That sounds wonderful. At least in my world it does. So, do you sing songs I would know?"
"Sometimes, but mostly I make up songs."
"Sing me something."
Henry paused before he broke into a round of The Beggar's Chorus. He sang the uplifting melody with the sweet voice of a girl. Noah looked upon him with awe as the boy hit every note with perfection. After he'd finished, Noah said, "That is excellent. You have a talent, Henry, and I have an idea." "Will I still have to go to Australia?"
"If you can get away, do it. But if England catches you, they will hang you."
"So I just have to be scared for months?"
"Whenever you are afraid, start singing. As you are walking to the boat, sing whatever will give you strength in battle. For Henry, you are going to war with your greatest fear, the ocean. So you will need your most powerful weapon, your voice."
"What if someone doesn't want me to sing?"
"Do it anyway. You won't be hurting anyone."
"But everyone is bigger than me. They might hurt me."
"That might be true.
There are evil folks around," he said, motioning his head toward Maxie.
"In that case, stop. Or maybe make up a flattering song about the man that wants your silence."
"Flattering?"
"You know, sing about how the man is smart or good-looking. But do not make fun of him. He's bound to toss you over the side of the ship if you do."
"That is what I'm afraid of."
"You can do this, Henry. You are the strong one. Someday, Joseph is going to be following you. So, you need to learn how to control your fears and strengths now."
"You think Joseph is going to follow me?"
"He already does. But don't ever control another. Guide them."
Noah paused, then with conviction added,
"You are the Samson of song. Be fearless with every verse, and your strength will only grow."
"I didn't know music was that powerful."
"Music has always been one of humanity's soothers of spirit. You have been empowered with the ability to use it."
"Thank you, Noah. I am going to get on that boat, I think."
"Just keep singing, even if it is just to yourself."
With that, Henry hugged Noah and said, "I wish you could come. My love for you has grown as well." The door to the day room swung open as the turnkey bellowed,
"All right, it's time for your sleep, lockdown."
"What?
Moaned Joseph. "It is good to know you are still breathing," said Noah,
as he stepped behind Joseph and helped him to his feet.
"Henry, you grab his other arm," he said,
flopping Joseph's left arm over his shoulders. Together, the three walked toward the door. But when Noah went left at the room's center post and Henry went right, Joseph went headfirst into the pole.
"Excuse me, sir,
but you should watch where you're going," Joseph said to the pole.
"He's probably going to feel this tomorrow.